Nanga, nai michi ARRANYINHA, yaya nanga nai adyamatna yarta, yawandi Wurundjeri yarta. In Adyamatna I say hello, my name is ARRANYINHA. I'm the firstborn woman of my mother. My name is also Marsha, that is the name I was given at birth. I come from the Flinders Ranges in South Australia, Adyamatna country. I now live in Geelong, the country of the Wadawurrung, and I'm proud to stand today on the country of the Wurundjeri. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and their emerging leaders that are going to do all of us proud. It's important for me as an Adyamatna woman to pay my respects to the country that I stand on, because like all of you that are not Wurundjeri here today, this is not my country, and it's an honour, privilege, and I'm very grateful to be able to stand here. Thank you. In terms of my background, I was born and raised in Adelaide. My mum was a member of the Stolen Generation. And I don't say member as it was an elite club that everyone was privileged to be part of. I say it as sadness, really. My mum was 7 years of age when she was removed from her family, her community and culture in a place called Nepabunna, which is at the northern end of the Flinders Ranges. She was taken with her two sisters and her two brothers, and they were separated and never saw each other again until my mum was in her late teens, where she reconnected to her family, community and culture. And she did that because, fortunately, she was 7 years of age and knew she wasn't an orphan. So she fought her way back to country. I sit here today on her behalf. I sit here today with her voice because she was rendered voiceless and powerless over many, many years. Abuse from systems, abuse from society, and she passed away 5 years ago as a very proud Adyamatna woman who didn't actually work in her later years of life but volunteered, like many Aboriginal people do in our community, helping homeless, helping those reconnect to their family, and I'm very proud of her for that. So as I speak today, if I do get teary, it's because I sit here with my mum behind me, my family behind me and my children in front of me, knowing that the change I can make today is for their generations and those to come. I started as a trainee in the state government of South Australia at 16 years of age, not having the capacity to go and study law, which I wanted to do because I like to argue with people and prove my point. So instead I started a journey in the state public sector, and over a 25-year period worked my way up through all of the ranks and became the manager of workforce planning and development in SA Health, to do with Aboriginal health. So that's the whole of the South Australian region for Aboriginal health, and got my wish to be able to argue at a policy level. So that was very awesome for me. But what I did see throughout my experience working in state government and now in Victoria in local government and having done some things within federal government is all of the work I did from an Aboriginal perspective always had another layer on top of that, which meant that the cultural clarity put into the work that I developed alongside of elders, community, traditional owners and Aboriginal people from a self-determination perspective always had the opinions of others, which I couldn't control. So my entrepreneurial journey started probably a lot longer in time ago than reality, which was last year for me. But it was all based on, I was born a social justice warrior. I was born someone who was going to shake this planet, and for me that was about system change and system challenge and make a better nation for all Australians. And that obviously is leading it from a First Nations perspective. So last year I joined Runway, which is an accelerator program in Geelong, and went through that, and that was a nightmare in parts, but very exciting in others because it challenged me to my very core. But I came out of that knowing that what I was doing was my cultural responsibility. And my mum and my mums have always said to me, as Marsha, you're a citizen of Australia. You have rights. But as ARRANYINHA, you have cultural responsibility. So that's where I am, and hopefully that wasn't too long. But
perfect.
That's my journey in a nutshell.
Jirra.
Hi everyone, my name is Jirra. I too would like to acknowledge the country on which we stand, our elders and those that have come before us. Like you so beautifully said, we sit here as representatives of many generations and many hard-won battles. My name, Jirra, means kangaroo in the language of the Gunai Kurnai. I'm a Yorta Yorta Wiradjuri woman myself, but lots of our language was not lost, but sleep in during the mission eras where our people couldn't speak our languages. So I was named Jirra in the language of the Gunai Kurnai. My mum named me after the kangaroo because they're the only species of Australian animals that have increased in numbers since colonisation. She knew that I would want to do big things in this world, and she said I was going to have to be tough just like them. My middle name, Lala, is my grandmother's name. Lala Morgan was a fierce matriarch from Cumragunja Mission. She raised her 14 kids on missions and fringe camps with a understanding of the need to give back to family and to community. And today there's over 600 direct descendants from my grandmother, Lala Morgan, and my grandfather, Alfred Bamblett, many of which are CEOs and chairs of boards and established a number of Aboriginal organisations. So I always sit here as a representative of that proud lineage. Awesome. I guess from my entrepreneurial journey, I've had two pivotal moments in my career. I'm really passionate about global First Nations connections. And when I was young, I got to go to the Asia Pacific Indigenous Youth Network Forum. I was writing for the Koori Mail, an Aboriginal newspaper at the time when I was studying media comms. And I met these young journalists, and they were Indigenous journalists writing about the hardships of Indigenous people. And they told me that recently the military had stormed their offices, machine guns, smashed up their computers. And coming from a place like Australia, I was shocked. I was like, what are you going to do? And they said, well, we're going to clean up the office and keep writing. And that made me come back to Australia and think I need to use my voice with purpose, but it also set me on a path of international journeys and travels that is continuing. And my other big moment was I was working in project development for a long time, but marketing, communications, and now entrepreneurship, like that's my passion. That's where I need to be. As we would say, that's where the ancestors, that's where they put me. And I couldn't get a job in that field. There wasn't Aboriginal jobs in marketing. And so I did a fellowship at the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra, and I was working in their marketing team. And I just thought, if I can do this here, I can do this in my own community. So I came back and started my business 7 years ago now, Kalinya Communications. It's named in Yorta Yorta in my grandmother's language. Kalinya means good and beautiful and honest. And they are my guiding business principles, what I strive for. And so, yeah, it's been 7 years. And I think for Aboriginal businesses, there's a lot of conversation now around where's the purpose in your business? Where does purpose kind of sit alongside profit? I think for a lot of Aboriginal business owners, it's the other way around. We start with our purpose and we figure out business and profit along the way.
True. Thank you. Brother Rich.
Genti Mungan, Brabalanganai Richard, Nakamana Nangura. Acknowledge that this is Kulin Nation country, Wurundjeri. Thankful to be here. My clan through my grandfather, my father's mother, my grandmother is Brabalang from the Gunai. My grandfather is Gunditj Mara, Karap Mara. My mother, she Yorta Yorta. My wife is Wiradjuri, and my son-in-law is Marlo from Tiwi. I just want to acknowledge my family, my children. Deadly to sit next to young, future, amazing entrepreneurs, which for me, who's now a grandfather, is sensational. Like my great-grandfather would have said, the dawning of a new day for our people, where we would take our place rightly alongside our white brothers and sisters to derive daily from this land the inestimable wealth that is inherently ours. And he wrote that back in 1929. So for me, as an Aboriginal grandfather, the future that's in this country I see for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and so on is a better future than what my ancestors lived through. And it comes about because there's openness, comes about because there's good people in the industry, good leaders in companies, in government, government-led programs like what Kate does. There's a good spirit out there, and just like the Me Too movement, people had to stand up and speak. And for a lot of Aboriginal people, for many years, there wasn't another voice. There was during the 60s with the 67 referendum. There was prior to that when you had people like David Unipen. Who know David Unipen here? For those that don't, he's on your $50 bill. Look him up. Australia's version of Leonardo da Vinci. If he got taught in the schools, there might be a different starting point about our capability as Aboriginal people to be seen as intelligent and capable. So it always gets back to the starting point of how you look at us, and sadly we've always been put at the back and never seen to be able to achieve. And my entrepreneurial journey started when I was young. I learnt to negotiate, so to speak. So my first business was I was a drug dealer. I know, made some good money, but a lot of unsavoury characters. Learnt to steal and then on-sell. I grew up in Broadie. I'm an old Broadie boy. Nothing against Broadie. I love Broadmeadows. A lot of my friends, you may know some of them. But for me, being creative and being entrepreneurial come from my decision to just not accept what my grade 6 teacher said to me. My grade 6 teacher, who remembers the blackboards? Whoa! Well, she drew on the blackboard, that's the monkey, that's you, Richard, the Aboriginal people, and this is us, the superior white people. And I said, well, how can that be, Miss Johnson, when I'm the best footballer, the best cricketer, the fastest runner, the highest jumper, the longest jumper, the best speller and the quickest at math? And she said, that's just the way it is. So I thought, well, why do I have to accept that when I know that as a family we'd been involved in helping to shape social change in this country as a family by being involved in setting up the first Aboriginal organisation with a lot of the other great families that Jirra's even talked about, her own mob. When you've got David Unipen, the Adjamuntna, very powerful people. So I thought, how can that be? And it's because the story is always told from a white perspective. And I thought, well, we need to start encouraging our own narrative. We need to encourage our own stories. And what I've done as a father is raise my children, where my youngest daughter at the age of 6 was selling her artwork and realising what her 10% commission was at the age of 6. She's now 14 and she's been actively painting. To my oldest daughter, who's 32, who owns her own plumbing company. And my other 3 children in between, my second daughter just met Anna Winter. I don't know if you heard of Anna Winter from Vogue, but she presented 2 of her looks recently at the National Gallery of Victoria, and at the age of 10 set herself a goal to be a fashion designer and an artist. So again, we believe in speaking in and speaking over our future, which is in our control, because as sovereign people that's spiritually connected to this land, when we draw up that energy, there's nothing that can stop us. So we reject all negative talk over our family or over our people. We don't talk close the gap statistics because that constantly talks negativity over us. And if you understand the power of the word, even when you're drinking your water, how it crystallises when you speak negative into it, or if you speak positive into it, how it crystallises. I don't know if you know a fellow called Dr. Masuri Omoto, but look up his research, and when you keep hearing the negative speak about our mob and over our country, it starts to align why there's such poor health. So if you're going to talk to us or with us or about us, choose your words very carefully and just believe that we can achieve.
Thank you. I might press into that because I think one of the one of the people I speak to outside of the Indigenous community often say, I don't know any Indigenous people, and I'm a bit anxious, a bit nervous about interacting. So, Richard, it's funny because you say choose your words carefully, but I screw up all the time when we're hanging out.
You're a beautiful man.
What's that?
You're a beautiful man, though.
But
in here.
I never feel judged. I never feel like if I say the acknowledgement wrong or do anything, but that's come through relationship, I guess. But I think that's really important that we wrestle with that. Is there is the sensitivity, but there's also a freedom of engagement. And I guess what I want to encourage everybody is how would you speak to this audience and speak to non-Aboriginal Victorians about how to engage with Aboriginal business, how to engage with Aboriginal people in a way that's that's free. Does that make sense? Or to overcome the anxiety of relationship?
We're business owners, buy from us. You know? I think there is a real mentality of that you bring in young people, which is fantastic, but I think in a way it's also our job as Aboriginal people to bring up our young ones. But we want to do business. And so I think that's a great starting point. But in terms of language, we're very perceptive. You know, that's a gift that we have and something that I nurture within myself, and I think it can be a business advantage sometimes, but it comes from a place of survival. When you've been through what our people have been through, your body is attuned to risk. And so if somebody in their deep core believes that because I'm an Aboriginal woman, I'm not as smart as them, or I can't be as successful as them, it doesn't matter what they say, what comes out of their mouth, and how much politically correct kind of buzzwords they use. I can feel it. And that's what he was saying. You're a nice guy. We know that. We can feel that about you. So if you say a word that's not the right word at the moment, we don't care. It's thinking about that stuff deep in yourself. We all have our own unconscious biases, and a lot of people haven't had opportunities to learn about the Aboriginal lens. But if you're coming from a good place, we sense it, hey.
I've had a white advisor for 14 years, advising me on white culture, because I don't think like a white fella. But I've got racist views, I've had racist attitudes, because it was a reflection of what was coming at me, and I had to be wiser about it. So I didn't know that the colonial and the European history of the British, the Scottish, the Welsh, the Irish, and how they didn't like one another. I didn't know any of that. I just thought all white fellas hated us, but they hate one another just as much. So that sort of took off the pressure of thinking, hang on a minute, they're just people. Doesn't matter. If you yourself, I generally say just get naked. In other words, just strip off all the pretense. Just be yourself. And like young Jirra was saying, you're intuitive. You know when there's tension, or you know when there's a bad attitude, or you know by the tone and the words, the way people choose their words, oh, you people. And their body language, oh, you people, or this or that. So growing up in Broadmeadows at the time, because we sort of had to move around a bit because of the way the system was in the day, they were real fellas, you know. They call you a name, you smack them in the mouth, they smack you in the mouth again, and then you're best friends. Well, some get married, but the kid that likes the girl punches them. But for me, and it's a really good question, John, you know, if you are who you are, that's why titles and all of that doesn't matter in Aboriginal communities. Like when all the big deadly footballers come home, they're just one of the mob. Hey, don't matter if you're one of Brownlow, you're still my nephew or you're this or that. But when they move around in the bigger society, they're held differently. And like my business title, I don't have CEO or any of that because that's a mainstream title because it gives importance. Mine is Dadjan in my language. That just means clever or person of wisdom or knowledge. And that doesn't mean anything either. But I thought if I've got to give myself a title, why don't I use my own language? And how do we reinforce a conversation? So, but honestly, if you've got a bad intention from the outset, you generally pick it up, and we're not about that. Our mob will always be open and willing to work with anyone. It just gets about what's your angle, you know? What are you trying to hustle on the street?
Fantastic.
Just don't go breaking in other fellas' houses.
So if we extend that a little bit as well and think through, there's great movements of Aboriginal businesses working together, encouraging one another. We've got things like the Kinaway Chamber of Commerce that sort of gets around it and supports that. More accelerator work and programs, LaunchVic have been supportive. That's all awesome. But from our conversations, I hear you say it's also important to not just be within the Aboriginal community, it's the interactions with the rest of the startup community, the rest of the business world are absolutely fundamental. So I'd love your reflections on that as businesses of how you see the I guess working collectively as one startup community, one group of entrepreneurs being critical, and what could we be doing better?
I guess if I look at my journey, like I said, I started at 16 as a trainee in the state government, but my position as trainee was in the School of Aboriginal Education, which was part of the Adelaide Institute of TAFE. So we were quite separate. You'd remember that place. We were quite separate from Adelaide Institute. So in a sense, even though we were part of a government organisation or a statutory education body, we were basically run community way. And my very first mentor and my uncle, Professor Roger Thomas, when I was 6 months there, he kicked me out and said, "You're going to go and work in the mainstream with those mob." And I went, "No, I'm not going, like, too scared. I don't know, they might not like me, you know." And he said, "No, you are strong enough, you can do this, and here's a present." So he sort of, you know, put the fear in me and then gave me a gift of a planner or something, which was pretty awesome. I still have that. But I thank him for that, because what that enabled me to do was understand two worlds. And I understood two worlds because my father is from England. He's from Liverpool. He came over here as what he calls himself, so please don't be offended, but he calls himself a 10-pound pob. Came over on the boat at almost the exact same time that my mum was stolen from her family. So I've grown up in two conversations. And then in the bureaucracy system, I got an opportunity to see two conversations. So for me as a business person, my business is about auditing organisations and how they look at a strategic and systemic level of approach to First Nations people and doing business. So I'm able to go into a non-Aboriginal organisation, look at what they do and let them know how they can work together with Aboriginal people and communities, Aboriginal enterprise, look at interactive, engaging, innovative ways of, like I said, making this nation a better place. So I take that with me. I take my ability to work between two worlds, to be able to talk in both conversations. And I am very grateful that I've had that experience. And that has come from having both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal really powerful mentors. And I don't mean powerful as in position, I mean powerful as in knowledge, as in wisdom, and as knowing when to kick me up the butt to get out there and actually do things that I, because of things spoken over me as a child, might have a fear of doing. It might trigger something for me. And that still happens, but I'm a lot stronger now. So in terms of interacting, the business that I run as well is also about, once I've done that audit or that assessment, where are the Aboriginal businesses that can do the work that needs to be done? So it's not about me competing with my brothers and sisters out there in the business world. It's about completing each other and giving each other more platforms, more opportunities. And where there is a gap, hopefully investing in people, Aboriginal people who will raise themselves up like I was given the fortune to do, and fill that gap.
Beautiful. Love it. I'm going to give you a clap for that. No, that was awesome.
If you understand Aboriginal kinship systems, reciprocal and mutual obligations, and the obligations that one another have, then you understand the way that mob will work together. I used to work for a big construction company on a national level, and they had this collaborative charter, and I thought, fantastic, these fellows know the way our mob interact, but they never worked together. It was all about who's the smartest fella in the room and rah, 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 and a lot of the egos, and I thought, far out, do these fellows really understand how mob work? How are they going to go out there and engage? So for me, understanding who we are as global citizens, for my children, my daughter Lanelle, the fashion designer, she's been building her brand on her Aboriginality, but she's getting to a point now where she's designing some clothes which is about the intersection of the songlines and the Silk Road. My grandfather, his birth name is Yongwakiatai. He's from the Sundu village of the Guangdong province in China. His father migrated out to Australia, married an Aboriginal woman, and that's through my mother. And my mother's grandfather was an ambassador from India to Mauritius, and he spoke 7 languages. So when you look at the Silk Road, and Lanelle starting to branch out her brand and incorporating her other heritage, it's first understanding who you are as an Aboriginal person within this nation, but then start to develop yourself globally in your thinking. And that's been a real struggle for a lot of Aboriginal people, because they've been told, like as artists, we've got an art business, Aboriginal art is dot work. Well, Aboriginal art isn't dot work. Aboriginal art is the art of Aboriginal people from wherever they're from. So how do we have a conversation to engage more people, to even expand the opportunity so that we're not stereotyped in an industry that can be economically liberating for our people? So for me, as Aboriginal people, how do we help lead the conversations? And you've got 2 amazing young women. Is it all right if I say that? Young kungas. But there's a lot of Aboriginal people that are just coming through the ranks, and what they need is to walk into a place knowing that you believe, because they'll know if you don't. Whatever your preconceived ideas are, whatever your attitudes are, whatever your fears are, strip them back and just listen to their story, because everyone's story has purpose. Everyone's story matters, and that's what we talk about. And I'll share a little bit more later. Love you, John. He's grouse, hey?
No, I'm a canvas, just letting you guys go for it. It's awesome. Jirra, did you want to add anything to that? Are we good? Oh, good. Excellent. Another question about entrepreneurialism. So if we're saying Aboriginal people are twice as entrepreneurial, roughly, as the general population, what's holding back being 4 times, 5 times? What's holding back more entrepreneurialism sprouting forth? What more could we be doing in partnership to encourage the ecosystem?
I've been thinking about this one a lot overnight. I think, yeah, we are, we're incredibly entrepreneurial because it's what we've always done. I mean, we had extensive trade routes in Australia for centuries and centuries, including international trade. And also entrepreneurship requires resilience and creative thinking and problem solving. And if you're going to get through what we've been through, you need those qualities, right? So that's natural. And it's also natural that when we don't always get a fair go in other workplaces, you know, what's the saying? That if instead of trying to pull up a seat at a table you're not welcome at, you just build your own table, right? And so I think particularly a lot of people my age are really wanting to do that. In terms of doubling the numbers, I'm really looking forward to the mainstream kind of tech and creative sector nurturing Aboriginal leadership. I think we naturally bring the next generation with us. That's the way we're raised. We're always taught that whatever doors are open for you, it's your responsibility to turn around and open that door for the next generation. And so you can count on us to do that. We'll double the numbers, but what we need to be able to create sustainable businesses, and we need to be coming in at higher levels. You know, I think that there has been a real history of bringing Aboriginal people in at lower levels where we're restricted. We're not working directly with decision makers. There's not always the opportunity to create the kind of space in organisations that we need to innovate the way Aboriginal people can. So creating a little bit of space at a leadership level and trusting us that we'll bring our mob with us.
Fantastic.
All right. How are we going to double it?
What would you do? What could we do
Have
to
more
get...
children? Is that what you mean?
Having more children will help.
Oh.
But
Okay.
I reckon you got some other
I
ideas.
get a bit lost. No, bless you. South Australia and the programs and initiatives Marsha was talking about, quite amazing. I did only done year 10. I've done year 11 3 times because I just love playing sport at school, and it was good fun going to the camps and that. And so that was sort of me, but because I couldn't get the same jobs as my mates, because even though I might have been smarter than them, they had a lot more opportunity. So I just figured I'll just hang around and wait. But for years I've thought, well, do we need to go to university to get a tertiary degree to be considered smart? And there's women that I know that went and got a PhD at Harvard University and were still questioned about their intelligence. So it isn't a qualification. What really is going to make change, and it's about the self-education, it's about the confidence of Aboriginal people, and when they're constantly questioned, even when you're in meetings, and a lot of the ladies in the room here, you'll know you'll be in a meeting and you'll say something, and then a man in the room says exactly the same thing and everyone goes, yep, what a great idea. Well, imagine that happening all the time as Aboriginal people. So how do you continually get above that? And that's the resilience. And it has to start at an early age. And that's what we made a decision on as a family, my wife and I. So for 15 years, we've been planning with our children. We get the start of every year and work out what our family goal is. Then we work out what our individual goals are. Then we look at what skills and abilities we all have to support one another to achieve our goals. That's how we've been doing it for 15 years, and that's why my 4 adult kids have their own businesses. We have a different conversation around the table, but we've done that over 15 years while we've had 80 deaths in our family. My daughter's 14 and she's been to over 60, 70 funerals. So how do you stay focused? How do you stay energised? And how do you do that? And again, it's about having the right focus, and a lot of our mob get diverted a lot of the time. So how do you stay strong in that? So we've made very clear decisions as a family, and as a result of that, I've been pulling together, and I've shared this a little bit with John, but over many years I used to be a business agent for ATSIC. Been up Tajamatna country. If you've never been up there, go up there. It's the biggest wedge-tail eagles ever, and the maru, the kangaroo. But building an Indigenous online business school is what I've been working on. It's an online school that talks about the practical realities of how do you get through. That's one of the things. Another program, and I was just talking to Warwick, hey bruz, about we're designing a program for Aboriginal kids in the Northwest called Creative Innovators. So, and we've just called a program called Economic Dreaming because our kids, their dreams have just been shattered. So how do you get them dreaming again? So there's initiatives, but there's also a narrative. So we need to change the narrative. And if there's tech fellows here and you can create apps and all of that, I believe we can get to the 4%, John. Beautiful. And go Collingwood.
Thank you.
Okay, I didn't know he was a Collingwood supporter. I might have moved up a bit. I'll leave the comic relief to you, brother. I think I agree with both what Jirra and Richard have said. It is about the narrative, and my word was going to be it's about the language. We have been, and always will be entrepreneurial because that's the way we were created to be that way. So we could adapt, we could change, we could see what was more beneficial for our people and our community and our language, you know, over many, many tens of thousands of years. So for me, looking in that space is, I didn't know that I was an entrepreneur until someone dragged me to a information session at Runway and said, this is what you are. So this was like March, February last year. I didn't know that what I was doing was entrepreneurial. So the conversation was lost on me, and possibly is lost because it's not a word we would use as Aboriginal people to describe what we're doing. We come up with an idea, we see a gap, we go, it needs to be done, I'm going to do it. We don't wait for a label to say that it's okay to do that, or this is the community in which we fit as an entrepreneur. So I think language, conversation, would shift that, and you may even see the numbers, you know, triple in size just because of that, because people understand a bit more that the step that they took, that leap of faith, that jump into the realm of the unknown, was actually entrepreneurial. So it's language, and it's also about opportunity and sharing that opportunity. And like Jirra said, as business people and as Aboriginal people, we will bring people with us. We're very much a community of people that listens to each other's good, bads and uglies more than we do on social media. We still have that really strong conversation within community. We can still have conversations. I could still have a conversation with an Aboriginal person that was sitting at the back of the hall while everybody was talking and I wasn't saying a word, and they would know what I was talking about just because of body language, just the way we hold ourselves, just the way we move our eyebrows and our lips. So there's all of this stuff happening in the background for us. And I didn't intend on this journey to be a person who would stand on a stage and encourage entrepreneurialism, but that shifted quite a bit because I see so many people I know just in Geelong, so many people I know back in Adelaide who have a right to be here because what they are doing is entrepreneurial, and it's disrupting the way we do business right here and now. So
fantastic, thank you. One more question and then might take some questions from the floor. And we've talked a little bit about tech in a couple of the answers. And community here is creative community, tech community. Jirra, you and I ran a session down in Gippsland with community down there about this conversation about why aren't we seeing more Aboriginals in the tech industry, even in the design thinking and other parts, which is a really natural fit for the skills and talent. Why aren't we seeing it? And post that, we've done a little bit of research and realised it's very lean on the ground. I think, is Levi here today from Indigitech? We're hoping. I know, he's a total legend. Anyway, there's an organisation called Indigitech that are doing a lot of work to build community around this and help build pathways into companies, into jobs in tech. And if you're a company, a tech company that would love to have more Aboriginal influence in your company, employees in your company, we can connect you with Levi and the team. They're doing amazing work. But I'd love your reflections on what's that gap between what I think is a natural talent, but not landing in jobs, in the fastest growing job sector in the economy. Why aren't we seeing more of that happening?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's that narrative. I think it's also that we care so deeply about the pain that our people are in that we take jobs that are kind of directly on the ground and working towards easing that pain, whether that be about housing or working with children that are in out-of-home care, and all of those kind of areas, that tech almost seems like, you know, this next big thing of, you know, it's just such big picture dreaming. And that's what I love about it. I don't work in tech, but I'm always hanging out in these tech spaces because it's thinking about the future, and that's so exciting to me, and the role that First Nations people and a First Nations world lens can play in the future, particularly as we're looking at such critical conversations around environmental care. You know, that of course First Nations people have a lot to contribute. We're looking at how to stay connected in an increasingly disconnected world. Like you were saying, we have the most connected community around. We have a lot to contribute to the building of the future Australia and positioning Australia in the global market as well, I think. In terms of increasing the numbers in tech, we're stretched. We're 0.9% of the population in Melbourne. We're stretched. And there's a very real history of economic exclusion. I'm first generation citizen here. That means, you know, not a lot of opportunity to generate the kind of intergenerational wealth that's required for business economies. But because we're stretched as well, and there's a bit of a kind of dynamic that happens in a lot of industries, that because Indigenous stuff is often considered a bit of a corporate social responsibility area, and people will often do it because of their own passion or interest or the goodness of their heart, but they also then expect us to. But this is our whole lives, you know, so if we're constantly kind of consulting essentially for free because it's somebody's interest point, that makes running businesses impossible. And so in terms of kind of increasing people in tech, I mean, it's about opportunities, but it's about real opportunities. It's about understanding that I guess it's moving the thoughts of Aboriginality from a kind of charity lens into an industry expertise. You know, we have a lot of years of expertise in our specific industry, and once that's acknowledged, that's when we can be working at a leadership level, and that's when we can be working for consultancy rates instead of giving away free advice all the time.
Nice. Any other thoughts? No? Good?
I was just going to say that my startup is actually a digital online tool. I don't even know the word. That's how techie I'm not. But if my 14-year-old boy was here, he would be able to stand up and pitch it to you and you'd all be buying it, because he's done coding. He wants to be a computer engineer. Yep. I don't know if that's the right word or whatever, but I think that's pretty awesome because of the way I've raised my children, much like you have. They don't look at a deficit model. They don't look at a welfare model. They look at it as, if I want something, Mum is going to be my biggest cheerleader and Dad is going to drag me along, and we're going to get it done because we're going to get it done. So I just wanted to add that to that, and I think again it is about opportunity. Yeah.
Starts in the home. The conversation starts in the home, the belief starts in the home, and it starts with also rejecting the negative statistics, rejecting the conversation that our mob aren't good at math or they're illiterate, they're innumerate, because that constantly reinforces those conversations. The intention is good, but we just got to start changing the language. My children have never ever heard us say we've been dispossessed. We never use that language because how can you dispossess us of our sovereignty, which is innate and it's inherent in our blood? So it's a different conversation. So we've got to start the conversation differently. With the tech guys, you experts in that space, how do we get more kids in there? It's just exposure. And I'll finish with this last piece. I didn't know that we were poor as Aboriginal family. I didn't know that white fellas lived different to us in Broady. When I was 14, my white mate invited me to his house. He lived in a brick house, so I thought, far out, these fellas must be rich. So I go into his house. I was the first Aboriginal fella in their house, and I walked in, said hello to his parents, eat, there you go. They sit down, and I kept walking out to the kitchen, opened the fridge, shut the fridge, come back into the lounge, and they're going, and my mate goes, "Come on, let's go." I said, "What?" Oh, I said, "Oh, okay, see ya." And as we're walking outside, he goes, "Where'd you go?" I said, "Went out to the kitchen." He said, "What for?" I said, "I want to have a look in your fridge." He said, "Yeah, why?" I said, "Because you invited me to your house." He said, "What?" Because with the Aboriginal mob, as you know, you invite them to your house, you invite them to your fridge. Why else do you invite them to your house? And he didn't understand, and I'm thinking, I said, "Anyway," I said, "You fellas must be millionaires." He said, "What?" I said, "You fellas must be millionaires." He said, "What are you going on about, youngie?" I said, "I've never seen that much food before in my life, because none of our mob had food. I was 14. We were living in Broady, one of the poorest northern suburbs, and yet they looked to me like they were millionaires, because all of my family had hardly any food." His starting point, my starting point. So I started to go to all my other white mates' houses, not looking in their fridges, but I needed to understand how come their situation was different to mine. So I started to question them. And then I started to realise it's the exposure. So what we've done with our kids is we've taken them to some of the richest places. And we've been fortunate. John Hilland, Crazy John, was a good friend of mine. He spent 3 hours with my children. Exposure. If you've got opportunities to bring young people in and expose them to a new way of thinking, that's all our mob really need, is the hospitality, a genuine belief and openness to just walk through and create that environment. Our mob can achieve anything.